Does the channel provide value?
Focus on the foundation.
I am a travel vlogger.
It's always about communication.
Build those partnerships.
What are the problems that you solve for your clients?
Just being ahead on the technological side of things.
Leading an organization.
You not only want to survive, but you want to thrive. They said it wouldn't last, and they said that you can't drive profitable and incremental revenue through the affiliate channel. But here we are, 20 years later, and the affiliate channel is alive and kicking and generating profitable revenue for thousands of retailers across the globe. Hi, I am Jamie Birch, your host of the Profitable Performance Marketing Podcast, where we talk to some of the industry's best and brightest about their careers, about leadership, and about how to drive profitable revenue through the affiliate channel. Hey, this is Jamie, CEO and founder of JEB Commerce, award-winning affiliate management agency, and I am excited to talk to you about our guest today, Lisa Riolo, co-founder of Impact, one of the big networks. Before we go into introducing this episode, though, want to let you know that if you are looking for the right strategy for your affiliate program right now, you're trying to navigate this ever-changing ecosystem that we're operating in, we have a service for you that we call the Strategy Roadmap. So you can go to jebcommerce.com/strategy and read all about the many different ways we help you develop the right strategy. We audit every single part of your program, including technology, which we talk about today in this episode. But we perform a gap analysis, introduce you to affiliates. We talk about the many different ways we can align your commission structure with affiliate performance, consumer behavior, and to meet your goals, and a bunch of different other things in your program to make sure you have the right strategy going forward. You get a document, a series of videos, and time with our management team to go over every aspect of this so you have the right strategy going forward in this pretty chaotic time, a challenging time, and to be successful in the future. Now, I had a great conversation with Lisa. It definitely goes over our normal time, but man, we just had such good conversation. And we start with a co-working facility, and JEB put our office in storage through the pandemic. We're going to be working remotely, but we do have a co-working facility that, well, I get to record these podcasts, and then staff gets to come in and out. And we really, and Lisa and I talk about this and our sense of community and how that is still needed here. So I think you'll love this. And if you're in affiliate marketing and you're wondering where we're going, at the end, I ask Lisa, where does she think the channel's going? She gives a wonderful answer I totally agree with. But along the way, you're going to find stuff about how to manage change, how to lead, some elemental, really important elements of leadership right now, and then what we should be doing as a channel going forward. And Lisa tells us exactly what the difference is between a technology platform and a network. Especially, it's really important in the affiliate channel, especially if you're deciding where to house your affiliate program and where to put it. She gives a really good example and dives right into it. So I also get to thank Lisa for something she did for me. It was really pivotal in my career and in the aspect of my career that is public speaking. So something similar to this podcast. So I get an opportunity to thank her for that pivotal moment in my career. And we also talk a lot about hers too. So without further ado, let's dive into our conversation with Lisa. All right, Lisa, thank you for joining me on the Profitable Performance Podcast. We are going to give it our best shot today and see if we can make it beyond 5 minutes.
I know. So you're referencing the fact that you and I attempted this, I think it was like 6 weeks ago or 8 weeks ago. And I could not stay on the internet long enough for you to we didn't even get in 5 minutes because your software that you use couldn't even get me through the test because I was getting booted off so often. So
it couldn't. We had no health checks. Yeah, I don't even know if we recorded anything at all. That was,
I don't think we did. Yeah.
I don't think we did. I think we got to about 4 minutes and it kept kicking you off. Now I am recording. We closed our office, and I like the phrase, put our office in storage. So I heard someone say that. So we did that just a few weeks ago and decided to go fully remote through 2021 just to keep everyone safe, and we're able to do our job fully remote. So I I may be the one who has a problem today because I'm in a co-working facility. This is my second podcast I recorded in this conference room. And I'm using a couple of different bits of equipment today. So hopefully it's not me. We get to get through to some actual questions and answers this time instead of troubleshooting, health checking microphones.
How do you like working out of a co-working facility? And I asked this as an owner of a co-owner of a co-working facility. How's that going for you?
I have to say I wasn't jazzed about it at first.
Right.
I think there was some stories around, I really need my space. Hauling all my stuff into a co-working facility is going to be annoying. I'm going to be smelling other people's foods that I know I won't like. And all that
so true. Stuff. Like the person eating tuna or somebody who goes and gets the microwavable popcorn when you really are not ready to be taking a snack time, Yep.
Exactly. And, salmon smells delicious when you're eating it. It's disgusting when it's someone else, right? And tuna fish too, like you said. But, we have a pretty unique organization here called the Innovation Collective. And they're launching them in different parts of the country. And so it's a building with your basic co-working facility, and they actually have two buildings across the street from each other. There's a Coeur d'Alene Coffee is in there, but the organization is all about entrepreneurship and startups. So there's a bunch of startups in the facility, and they do things. Wednesday mornings they have coffee and concept, where people gather actually right behind me on the lawn when it's nice out and talk about new projects they're working on, startups they're trying to figure out how to get off the ground. And things like that. And then I think once a month they do a fireside chat on I think a Wednesday night too, where they bring in someone, and they've had some pretty amazing speakers talk about, all sorts of projects they're working on, leadership, things like that. They have a leadership program here. I think they call the Great Eight. And so there's a couple other benefits. So when I first came, we decided to close the office. We went fully remote. There's certain things I can't do at home. My wife homeschools, and everyone has found that if I'm home while they're homeschooling, I just annoy everybody. So I had to have.
And it's not the reverse, right?
It is not the reverse. No. I am in everyone's business, and I don't mean to, but.
No, yeah.
So we needed to find a facility, and they had this here. We had been a member before for some other perks that they have. They have a really cool, what they call the lair, kind of like a speakeasy vibe down in the basement that you get to use. So we've been here for 3 weeks, and it's really been great. The facilities are awesome. Everyone here has been great. There's some people, one of my advisors is in here. I didn't even know that. The coffee is really good. And the facilities are great. So it's been fantastic. My staff has been able to come in when they want. And although most of my staff is social distancing and wearing masks and doing those kind of things, which is not the norm here in Coeur d'Alene. Yeah. So every once in a while we get together, and that's really cool because it's not been, and you've experienced this too, right? There's not been a lot of opportunity to be face to face in the same room with people. So
right.
Overall, it's been a really great experience.
Yeah, I would. What I like to when I talk to people a little bit about co-working, and I do think it's relevant for everybody because as they've gone through the pandemic and the how that has affected their work, I think what you're referencing is community, and that concept of it's not just the physical space. Of course, that's part of it, but it's really that energy that gets created around community, and a good amount of it can absolutely be virtual, but virtual oftentimes ends up planned. Like you and I are on the schedule so that we have this conversation. It's not just sort of that casual. I connected with someone because I bumped into them while I was having that excellent coffee, which by the way, you have to have excellent coffee in the co-working. It's just a must.
True.
It was like when we were building it, which now is getting closer to a decade later. Yeah. And one of the things was that we had to have great coffee, and, we knew we needed bulletproof Wi-Fi. And then you really needed to facilitate that feeling of community. And what I love about what gravitates a lot to co-working spaces is what you said about the startups or the entrepreneurs, certainly the advisors that want to be able to connect with people. I think all of those being in one area. And then you've got a lot of smaller businesses that are oftentimes well established, but just recognize that there's that price point that makes sense with co-working instead of having the whole building. So one of the things that I always used to say to people was, I've been working from home personally on and off since pretty much 2006. And more on than off, where I work mostly from home. And there's a couple reasons why people seek out, I think, co-working, but also just the work from home. It's not always ideal. Some of it's the physical space. Some of it's what you described, which is I've got other people in this house, and us being on top of each other just doesn't really work. Mm-hmm. But there's also, and I am not married with kids, right? So I'm by myself. And you become isolated a lot of times. Yeah. And so there's that mental health aspect of just being able to go in and be in a professional environment versus being what I call a cafe squatter, right? So there's all the people that line up at the various coffee houses, and that's not the most professional if you want to have a meeting, or even especially a team meeting, and or you want to get a power outlet and you can't. So there's all these different reasons why it makes sense to possibly utilize co-working that allows that then you can go back and forth, right? You can go back and forth between I'm working from home and all the benefits of that, or I'm always distracted when I'm at home, because you can hear, it's not so much with Zoom, but you can hear it on the call where somebody opens the refrigerator and you can hear that suction sound.
Or, and what it is, ice maker.
Exactly. You hear the change in the acoustics, or somebody's doing their laundry, or whatever it might be. And I think it's natural that we're all doing it now. I heard you talking about this on one of the other episodes where, people are getting used to the idea that they've got, the pets or the kids are, Zoom bombing you, or, and it becomes very natural. It's actually, there's some elements to it that make it really great. And lighten up the mood sometimes. So anyway, I think co-working is such an interesting sort of cross-section between the full-blown office environment, the work from home. It allows for that transition. And I think people are eager right now. So we'll see how the co-working businesses do. We were maybe slightly ahead of the curve when we opened up. The company that I have, that people I went to college with started, it's called Work Zones. And there's a few people in our space that have actually done this. Tim Storm, that was the founder of that wallet. Yeah, he and his wife had called me because the physical building that they had, I believe in Wisconsin, but I might be mixing that up. He had, he owned that building. And so they decided they were going to open up basically, sometimes it's an accelerator, a co-working business. And we spent quite a bit of time talking through, like, here's the challenges that we faced when we opened. Here's the kind of packages that worked. These were the elements. And you described, what we used to call the programming, where you have these different opportunities to interact with other members, the drop-in component, all of that. So it's a tremendously fun business. And, I think a lot of people should be examining this as an opportunity to figure out that happy medium between I'm not ready to go back into the work environment for whatever reasons, whether they're compromised or their company has deemed the fact that they can't accommodate, whether it's social distancing or what have you. So, I think it's a fun way to work.
Yeah, and you mentioned programming. Before I really got into it here, it just sounded like it just had an air of a singles meetup to me, and we stayed away from it. But really good programming is outstanding. And I don't know, maybe that says more about me than it does about co-working.
No, it's true. There's an element to it of that, the awkwardness of I don't really know these people, and
yeah,
and how to
found,
create. I was just gonna say how to create connections, right? When you don't really know people, that was part of my job, being the community manager, if you will. It was making those things easy so that when people showed up together, that they didn't have that weird meetup feeling that you just described.
Yeah, and I found I've been more productive here, and I think it's a bit of the energy. The last month we had our building. I was pretty much I was the only one there. And it is just as isolating as being at home, like you said. And there's an energy with, people going through the coffee shop and through the building. And you're hearing, one of the really cool things is, we're in a pretty rural area. It is a resort town, so we do attract a lot of creatives, a lot of developers who can work from wherever they want, and started making that migration a decade ago. And so to listen, to just kind of overhear other conversations and kind of be reminded, like, there's a really vibrant startup and technology and marketing culture here that sometimes we even get isolated within our own organizations. So that's been a really neat thing to kind of witness. Now, I know, or I have looked at, co-working as sort of extension of the gig economy or something to support the gig economy.
Right.
With the pandemic,
right.
and with you being a co-founder of Work Zones, have you seen that your demographic change to owners like me?
Certainly. It's interesting. I haven't been as engaged, partly because I'm very much quarantined, et cetera. But as I've talked to some of my, the other co-founders, right, that they're way more active in it. We've faced a whole lot of different challenges. But I do think that, kind of to your point about the gig economy and that even the startup component versus business owners that are relatively well established, but have just these different sets of needs. One of the things that we've started to see is that there's more willingness on the part of a business owner that has a little bit of a larger team than they used to. So what we used to see in the beginning was an owner who had maybe up to about 10 people was pretty much the max before they had oftentimes the mindset that said, I want to have my own space. I want to brand my space. My physical space becomes part of our culture and just how we operate. And so there is an openness, I think, for larger size businesses to say, I've got membership, or I've set this up in a way that my staff can come and go as needed, but we do have a physical place where we can meet. Or if they don't have a at-home situation that's really, well, if they have an at-home situation that's lowering their productivity, this is that alternative. So you do see that shift, I think. And then I would say, I don't know if this is really answering the question the way you were thinking, but what I am seeing is more people are open to this notion of, I want to be around a diversity of thinking. Now, when we think about over the course of the summer, there's been an elevated awareness of obviously just diversity in general. And many of us are just continuing to learn and listen and understand more about, how we can help, I think, facilitate inclusion. And I think that also extends in the way that people think. So you mentioned about, your facility attracts creatives. And I just really believe that people are much more open to the idea that, hey, let's say I'm a marketer, or let's say I'm an engineer, a software developer. Maybe I'm a business development or a sales professional. And there's different issues that you face about how you want to interact, but getting that easy connection to someone who thinks differently, so you can see the world through a different lens, including the way that they go about their work and their process. So that's something that I see more and more people gravitating towards, whereas before they didn't even have an awareness that could be that could change the way they work, and that it could change the way that they interface with their customers. And so that's the shift that I've noticed, and I not only welcome it, I believe so strongly that we have to continually work to force that in to the way that we are engaging with everyone, whether it's work life or outside of work life.
Yeah, definitely. There was a study, I don't know when it was done, but they basically had two groups solve a problem. One of them was homogenous. They had the same educational background, ethnicity, and pretty much the same experiences. And the other was as diverse as you can, diverse in age, ethnicity, gender, educational background, job vocation, all of those things. And what they found and you probably already know where I'm going, but they found time and time again that the more diverse group solved problems more creatively, quicker, and more effectively.
And we can learn so much from that, putting ourselves in a more challenging situation. I think the world has done that for us right now. So
yeah, it's been completely crazy year with COVID and the
hasn't it?
How do we have an argument over whether masks are okay or not, and how that's politicized? I don't understand. And then starting with George Floyd and many before that, it's been a pretty chaotic summer. How have you been navigating all of that, personally, professionally?
Yeah. I think if I remember correctly, you and I had the first attempt at this this episode of your podcast. I don't believe that a lot of that, I guess, unrest had happened just yet. I'm almost positive it hadn't. And one of the things I had shared with you in one of our earlier conversations was that I really was heads down. I was taking advantage, if you will, of the concept of quarantine, and I was probably taking a little bit to the extreme. And anybody who knows me would be like, Lisa, doing something to the extreme? What? Of course I was, right? And so I had my head down, and I wasn't paying very close attention, and part of it was on purpose, because I kept finding that all the divisiveness was really. I'm a pretty empathetic type person, and it was definitely getting to a place where I just wasn't. I was getting so distracted that I didn't think it was healthy. So I didn't think it was serving me well. And so, so I came out of that. It was a Saturday, and I just didn't realize I wasn't consuming news, to be honest with you. And I came out of Saturday morning, and I was like, I haven't been online for over a week. And I looked at the news, and I was just kind of devastated. And I am old enough, because I think I'm about 10 years older than you. I am old enough to have gone through a lot of unrest and protesting back in the, oh my God, I'm about to say this out loud. I believe it was in the late 80s when, Reginald Denny and then
Reginald Denny, yeah,
the Rodney King, and I was I had just moved back. I grew up in the Santa Barbara area, and I had just moved back from having lived in Los Angeles. And I'm looking on the news, and I was like, that's like a block from where I used to live. And, that it was just crazy to me. And I thought to myself, like, first of all, how did I miss it? But I have, it's been a great learning lesson for me in terms of just navigating that balancing act between how does this become a distraction? How am I a good leader? I think, I'm back at Impact. I'm one of the co-founders of Impact, and I had left for a while. So I get back and trying to work with my team. And one of the things for me was really letting them have the time that they probably needed to process and let them navigate what was best for them, and put their own lives and value and the space that they needed emotionally to handle what was going on versus the work situation, and that we would just navigate. And this is sort of a theme that's been going on, right? Parents that have never had to try to understand about homeschooling. I know your family, your wife has been homeschooling, right, for quite a while, isn't that? Am I remembering that right?
I think outside
Yeah.
of 2 years, my two youngest entire education so far. So, they're in 8th grade and 7th grade.
Yeah, right. Exactly. And
Yeah.
so, your your family's able to do that, make that transition probably. And one of them is kick you out of the house so that you don't bother them. But like a
Or
lot
use
of
the
people
Wi-Fi.
actually don't have that. Exactly. A lot of people don't have that ability, or they're just not set up. And then certainly as you're consuming news and information that's really important to you, being able to just kind of deal with all of it. So personally, what it is I'm like anything, when we face conflict, I just try to learn from that. I think that's probably like, I try to approach things with more a sense of curiosity. I find that when I'm not curious, I'm probably coming from a place of either, maybe a lot of confidence to the point where I might miss things, or a lot of insecurity to the point where, maybe fear or something else is getting in the way of my listening to something.
Yeah.
So I either, overconfident or underconfident maybe. And so I've been trying really hard, I think a lot of us, just to listen, to learn. What's great about it, Jamie, is it's causing an interesting shift for me, which is, you get to a point where you have a lot of years of experience. You and I both go back. I actually think you go back farther than I do in performance marketing. I was
think
trying
by
to remember
like 6 months.
Yeah, maybe. But I know for sure that there was still a 19 in front of the number when you were getting going. And I'm pretty sure for I was doing marketing, but I had a 20 in there. So yeah. But anyway, so, you and I, when you've been in the industry for a long time, and there comes this point where there's the shift of, I know too much for my own good. And I think mentoring or like leadership, right? The leadership component has to be is great. I have all this experience, which is awesome. But at the end of the day, people have to have their own, they have to go through it, whatever that is, whatever, they have to create their own experience. And so for me, it's become, how can I see things through the eyes of the people that I'm working with differently and new? How do I pay attention so that I'm learning in this process, and that I'm not only coming at it from only I know? Like, I don't want that to be how I do things. But at the same time, not only navigating our environmental challenges that are in front of us, but also professionally, how do we evolve what we've been doing for all these years? So we've got now 2 decades for some of us, and some people it's a decade, but that's still a long time. And how do we evolve and change and move forward without losing all the great parts of our experience and our knowledge? And so it's been fun, because that's actually where my professional focus is right now, is on that next evolution of how do we facilitate change. And so I think it's a lot coming at things from a place of curiosity, trying to learn from people. When I mentor, I think I may have told you this before, but when I'm mentoring someone and someone comes to me and they're like, will you be my mentor? My response right back is yes, as long as you agree to be mine. And, really young people are like, what? What are you talking about? And I am like, listen, I go, there are so many things that I don't know how to navigate, or that I don't understand. I remember, listening to when you were interviewing Steve Denton. And I remember Steve saying something along the way about, he was talking more about how the team meetings and what they would be doing, but what's fun, I think it was. And he was like, what's fun for some guy in his 50s compared to somebody who's 26, it's probably not the same thing. And I was like, that's exactly right, is that we have to learn along the way too, is, what's interesting. And it could be anything. It's like, what's the music that you're listening to? Like, what's your playlist? And people are like, that's such an old thing to talk about. It's like, no, let's listen to that music and understand what appeals and where is that theme that's going through. So there's so many great things that, adversity and challenges and change. And if you want to be a change agent, how to go about doing it. So
You mentioned curiosity, and I think what I've seen in this, in the whole thing, in COVID and your response, whether you're right or left, the Black Lives Matter movement and the social, I don't know, you call it unrest or revolution or things like that, is the lack of empathy, the lack of curiosity, and then how important that is as a leader. And yeah, we're not 25 anymore, and a lot of my staff is in their late 20s and early 30s, and being curious and leading with curiosity and empathy, especially in times like this, right?
Right.
You and I have been doing this for about 20 years. We have experienced a ton of change. Do you find that those are like the two biggest things in leading an organization that you need to continue to hold on to?
I do. And well, there's that. And I think something that's more unique about the way I approach things, and I'll share that with you as well. But I think curiosity, especially, I mean, this is just, it's applicable to so many things. I saw you did a post on social media at one point, and you were very much coming from a place of genuine curiosity. And one of the ways I can tell that that is the case is that when somebody is asking more questions than making statements a lot of the time, then they really are coming from a place of curiosity. And that's what you were doing. And you were really, I think, genuinely you were seeking to understand. And so I think that's super important because we have to be open to this idea that, again, this diversity of thinking and viewpoint. And then what we can do is find the overlap where, where we share values, or that's how we can find, that's how we can have a conversation, right? Is to find that overlap. And the thread for me right now is that that's true in life. And then it's true when I'm thinking about work. And so for me, it's a lot about the philosophy of partnering, right? And so I am really focused on what makes for a great partnership. What is that mindset when whether it's two companies that are coming together or two individuals that are coming together, or, within even a family unit. I am decidedly different than everyone in my immediate family that I grew up with in terms of my viewpoint, but I try really hard to find where, let's say I was talking to my dad the other day and he was talking about, let's say, Team Red, and in his mind, I'm as blue as you can come. And I'm like, I'm really not that blue, Dad. I'm actually pretty purple, right? Like, just because of how I was raised. And it's more an appreciation of understanding where people could come from, et cetera. And at the same exact time, looking at people that are like, you are not, for example, it's not even the political part, but it's you're not progressive enough in your thinking. And me trying to learn and go, okay, what is it about how I'm coming at this that's different? And so where that overlap occurs is how we actually get things done. I think the problem solving example you gave for people is really a great point of, if you have a diversity of thinking, you'll actually get to a solution because what you have to do is compromise along the way. And innovation comes out of that forced, compromise. People talk about outside the box thinking. In my experience, when I start thinking outside the box, it's a huge amount of resistance to change, right? To the point where people are like, what are you talking about, Lisa? And I got some really good advice from one of my peers at Impact. And she was like, Lisa, she was taught by somebody, but you gotta, instead of like trying to get people to see your way of thinking outside the box, they're like, no, I'm in the box and I get it. She's like, you got to make the box bigger. And I was like, God, that's such a great way of approaching it is that instead of trying to, leapfrog situations, it's how do we expand what we're doing with the common ground. And so I think that's important for things like partnering together. And then, what else I think is really important in terms of leading, and hopefully, I don't know if, you've talked to people about this or not, but one of the things people ask me a lot of times is like, well, what do you do? And I don't answer that question probably the way they're expecting. I say, I'm really passionate about transforming potential into performance or realizing potential. Sometimes depends on who I'm talking to, how I answer that. And for me, that's probably the other big thing about leading in times of challenge or difficulty, or a lot of change. You know, over the years, I've gone through a lot of, let's say, mergers or, different acquisition, new ownership, whatever you want to call it. And honestly, like every few years, I felt like I was going through something like that. And you have to find the opportunity in the difficulty. Like it's that pessimist versus the optimist. And so for me, it's finding the potential and then locking into that and focusing in on it and trying to really realize it. And I think that's how I approach people too. You know, I like to, and I think you do too, Jamie. I think you are very much like me about, hey, I've heard you say, like, I see the good in people, right? Or I see, the best in people. I was like, yeah, you see the potential. And my goal as a leader is for people to see it in themselves and believe in it themselves. And sometimes we're, believing in them more than they're believing in themselves. And when I start to encounter that, I start looking at, okay, what is it about that? Maybe they're not doing the thing that they're most passionate about, or maybe they're not in the exact right role. And you see that all the time where you start to shift the way people work and they really, they start performing really well. And so I look at that and I go, yeah, like potential is something that I think is a guiding principle right there with curiosity. So
I love that. And yeah, we do share that. One of my best moments in the work that I do is when someone that I see potential in, is struggling, and then kind of gets through, breaks through that barrier and starts to do amazing things without, pushing and prodding. And that happened in one of my companies. Just a couple of weeks ago, I was in a development meeting. I said, well, what's the big obstacle you need help with? What are we going to tackle now? And this employee, she looked at me and she goes, nothing, I already took care of it. I'm like, well, tell me more about that. And so she began to tell me all these, what she was doing, what was making her upset, what was inefficient, and how she could see that was a limiting belief that she had. And she changed that and is changing that our organization there. And it was just awesome to see that. What is, when you're working with, an employee, a staff member, and you're trying to turn that potential into performance, like what do you use to, what have you found effective? Is it just completely one-off to each person? Is there, are there tools that you use? Like, how do you, what's been effective for you to help them see that the potential you see in them?
Yeah. It's probably a lot of different little things that, I think like that's a good question. It's like, what do I do? One is, the kind of the Myers-Briggs sort of personality thing. And I'm aware of other ones. A lot of people use different assessments, but I do think that there's an important component to that in terms of helping read people. Probably a great example is I had someone who was our controller back when I was in the first round at CJ, or in those very early days. And she and I stayed pretty good friends outside of working together. And I used to, and then we worked together when we founded Impact. And and I was like, why are you still a controller? And it was decidedly the role that she wanted. I was like, you could totally be a VP of finance. You do a lot of consulting work. You could, I don't understand why you don't do more. And then another thing was like, she would have all these great insights that she would talk to me about, but we would be in a meeting where I would look at her like, you need to say this, right? Like we just talked about this. You need to bring this up, or what? She wouldn't do it. And then a few more years later, and I was kind of on her about that. Again, I thought I saw this potential. And then she contacted me one day and said, oh my God, have you seen that TED Talk about being an introvert? I think the woman's name is, I don't want to misquote this, but Susan, you know what, Jamie, we'll come back to it. I'll figure out the link. Okay. But So in any case, she told me about this TED Talk, and it was Lisa, this is me, and I finally understand me. And then she bought the book, and she's reading the book. She's like, you need to read this book as a leader. And what it really was that introverts need time to be able to prepare. So, oh my God, it's so funny because she was like, this is me, and you need to read this book so that you can be a better leader. And you need to understand that we need to prepare. Introverts really need to prepare, and that what they want to say. They're not going to be in a meeting and just pop up. And it was so like, it changed things for me quite substantially in terms of just understanding the difference between an introvert and an extrovert. Another example like that, which actually came even earlier, but it was a different one, was the difference between judgers and perceivers. Again, in the Myers-Briggs, and people trying to understand what they are. But I was at a meeting. The company was a complete virtual company, and once a month we all flew in and had, or some of us drove in and had a meeting near LAX airport. And we had like a 2-day meeting where we were all in the room, and basically a big argument that took up like a morning section was between judges and perceivers about honoring scheduling and timing, and really understanding that like a perceiver doesn't want to get trapped into a corner and doesn't want to have to commit because they feel trapped literally. So they don't honor time in the same way that a judger does, where they're like, hey, I'm prompt, I'm on time. And the judges and the perceivers were just arguing, and one of the main guys, the CFO, was like, the judges always have to put up and compromise our way of doing it because the perceivers never bother to show up. And it was just this huge fight. But I was like, oh my gosh, look at what a difference these little parts of the personality and how people work together. And so as I've learned a lot of those types of things, people who are intuitive versus the people who are, I gotta feel it and touch it and see it to believe it. And people like me, where I'm like, if you believe it, you're going to see it. And I'm like a huge, I'm off the chart on that one part of the personality. And so learning those kinds of things about how people are and how they tick allows you to really kind of grok with them sometimes. So even though it's very personal for that individual, you're starting to figure out is like, they're either uncomfortable, they're in a situation where, it's for them, they need to see data to be persuaded. It doesn't matter how much how great you are at convincing them, and you might be likable and all that, but at the end of the day, they're not going to make a decision unless they can actually see it, the data itself in black and white. And so for me, it became understanding how somebody's kind of interacting with the rest of the world, and then looking at group dynamics and how that person might be interacting in the group. And then how are they partnering, or how are they collaborating or working within that larger community that they're engaged with. And so sometimes that's the customer base, right? And you got these people who are like, I don't enjoy, like so many people. I'm like, I don't want to sell. I'm not going to sell. I'm like, we're all in a way, we're all selling, but you have to look at it. And this is my piece of advice to anybody who goes, I don't want to sell, but in a weird way, they're in a role where they're kind of selling or retaining or interfacing with customers. And I'll say, look, all sales is helping people make a well-informed decision that's right for them. It's not about your agenda. It's about their agenda. And you're just giving them information so they can make a good decision. And that's something that, like, when I worked at Pete's Coffee all those years ago, it was like I had to talk to people about, our culture was not about, at Pete's was not about selling things. It was about educating people. And then they would make their choices about what they wanted. And if it wasn't a good choice for them, nobody was sitting there going like, well, no, you got to buy this, you got to buy this drink, you got to buy this, grinder, you got to buy these coffee beans. It was just educating them. And I feel that's the same today. If somebody's buying technology or the services, and I think that's the way, Jamie, I was thinking about like your strategy service, right? And you're really just educating people along the way. and you're helping them make a decision or decisions that are right for them. And I really, it's like, you're not out there going, hey, you got to do this. It's more of a like, here, I can educate you about it. And if that works out and it's an effective fit, we might work together more because there's value there. Right. And so I think, it's an education process. It's a being helpful and valuable, and not having your own personal agenda. You got to be really good, I think, when you're helping other people, to not be putting your own agenda first. And when that starts to happen, you're probably not doing a good job as it relates to the other person. So having your own, having your own stuff together in terms of, is this something that's right for me to be doing what I'm passionate about for me? Is this helping me?
That's awesome. And it sounds like your controller gave a really good example of what you mean by I'll mentor you if you mentor me. Like,
Totally.
you have to read this book. I had something similar, kinda. One of my right hands here for a really long time, John Goodwin, before sales pitches, 15 minutes before, would bring me a Snickers.
Yeah.
And I was like, why are you always bringing me candy? He goes, man, if you're hungry, you're really bad at this.
Yeah.
So I want you to have a full belly before we get on
It's
this
totally
call.
true. Yep. Yeah, they reflect you. They reflect back, and they feel safe that they can actually give you that, kind of feedback. And it's, you have to have a certain amount of, I said before about like being overconfident versus, as a leader, like sometimes you get overconfident and sometimes you're not, and you're insecure. But when you're, it's when you're not at your best, what does that look like? And being able to have the people around you feel safe to tell you, hey, like, you're not at your best. And it's hard. You got to pull it out of people sometimes, but because they're like, oh gosh, you're the boss or what? And I'm like, yeah, whatever. It's like, I'm not great at certain things, and you got to have self-awareness. It's like, yeah, I'm not good at that, or I'm not the best person to do those things. I'm really good at this. I'm not good at that, that type of approach. So,
yeah. And you said self-awareness. One of the things that I've learned now running two businesses is that leadership is a crucible of self-awareness.
Yeah.
And it's just this, you learn so much more about yourself and how you lead and why you lead that way, it's just, sometimes it feels like you're on fire.
Yep.
But I want to talk about, your current role, what Impact is doing, and just the affiliate marketing in general. But I get to thank you for something you did for me that you probably don't even remember, years and years ago, that it just was awesome. I don't know if you remember this, and this may be when, I don't think it's when we first met, but I think it was close to that period of time.
Mm-hmm.
I have had a huge level of anxiety for public speaking. Like, I think it's like the second biggest fear for people in their lives, like drowning, public speaking, fire.
Yeah.
I spoke, I think, at LeadCon or something like that. And you made sure to go out of your way and let me know how well I performed as a presenter and the answers. And it was a huge part and point in my career in order to see that I could do that. And I just wanted to thank you for that. You really went out of your way to make sure I felt that I did a good job, and I had that was a skill set that maybe I thought I didn't have. And I want to thank you for that. It was a big moment for me, and it helped me to even do stuff like this now, recording a podcast with some of the most amazing people in our industry. So yeah, thank you.
Well, you're welcome. That's I do remember a couple of our different, interactions, and I do remember you, the anxiety. I understand that too. I mean, I think if I am remembering correctly, like I too had some of that, and people would always be like, "Oh my God, there's no way you just get up there." And I was like, "No, you don't understand." Like, I used to be, not to be gross, but like I'd be dry heaving in the bathroom, before any time that I had to speak. And so yeah, Yeah, and it's a big deal because of how much we grow, right? Like, so it's growth through adversity or growth through challenge, and what do we learn from those things? But it's also that those are the confidence builders as we do those steps. If it's important, whether it's overcoming a fear or like I really want to do these things, and I really want to contribute. Like in your case, you want to contribute to the industry as a whole. You're not just coming at this from a, hey, I just want to be a celebrity, right? And I think even in our little even in our little industry, right? So it's really it's my pleasure, and I'm really glad that you said that. And I feel like I do get a lot of joy in seeing other people continue to grow and evolve. And I tell people sometimes, it's like, hey, I would go, I would work for you, meaning, and there's a lot of people over the years where that's kind of that measure of, I see so much potential in them that is like, as they go on and go above where I am at, maybe in different ways, like even within a corporate situation. And, it's funny at Impact, I wasn't going to come back. So I left, and I was doing a lot of different things. They were fun. I'm very entrepreneurial in the way that I like to think about, things and work. And I was talking to Adam Weiss about at one point about, I think in lead gen and considered purchase, that we could really, there's an evolution here. There's a bridge between the two sides being able to come together. And I see it so clearly. I think we could do something here. And he was like, Lisa, if you could solve that problem after all these years, like 20 years later, it's still kind of the same setup. He said, that would be amazing. Right. And so, I was at a good place, and all of a sudden, I had this meeting with Mike Head, who, at that point was kind of the general manager at Impact. And Mike, we hired Mike, and, Mike reported to say Todd Crawford, I think it was. And I was kind of a general manager, whatever. And Todd was trying to teach Mike along the way. And Mike just kept going at a pace that was a lot faster than probably certainly where compared to his experience, right? There's that ambition that you see. And so Mike, one night in our first couple of years, probably our first year that we were in business, I said, well, what do you want to do? Where do you want to go? What do you want to do in your career? And he's like, I want your job. And I remember at the moment I was like, you can have it. Like, dude, like if you want my job, you can have it. And then, fast forward like 7 or 8 years, and he and I were at like a cocktail hour or something like that. And I was like, oh, I heard you got promoted. So he got my old job, and obviously the organization was much bigger and farther along. And so he and I went to lunch or something, and he said, hey, would you be interested in coming back to Impact? And I was like, no. I'm like, no, I genuinely I'm having fun. I do a lot of consulting work, which means I get to do projects and means I get to work with a lot of different people. And he, we just kind of went back and forth, and he wasn't really going to take no for an answer and wanted me to rethink about it, because he's like, we're really at a point where we recognize that, we're very focused on partnerships and new kinds of partnerships. He's all, but we're struggling a little bit with, we're good at bringing on the brands and especially the bigger enterprise type companies. There was a lot of wins that Impact had over the last that couple of years. And so I was like, all right, tell you what, I'm like, you can bring me on as a consultant. And so literally I started working on it and got hey, Lisa, in my own head, I was like, this is definitely a full-on full-time role that they need. And so I'm signing up essentially to go now work now my boss is going to be somebody I was mentoring. Right. And so it really did come full circle, and I'm good with it. Like, there are certain aspects of the role that he has that I don't thrive in, and I'm not interested in. And I really wanted to focus in on, again, facilitating change and really moving Impact into the next place. So my role, even though I'm a co-founder of the business and I was there in the beginning, I'm also now the VP of Strategic Partnerships. And I'm really focused on partnerships. The SHIP part it's a relationship between two different companies and how the customers are going to work together, or how companies are going to work with Impact and try to get Impact to a place where that shift that I think is necessary to really facilitate that. What does that look like? And so that's my focus. I've spent the last probably 6 to 8 to 9 months, whatever it's been, really working on a partnership framework, working on the methodology that we're going to use for helping customers partner together, and then also remain very respectful to the fact that this is in fact a technology platform. We're not exactly a network, and I can explain why that would be, and what those challenges are when you're not a network, right? There's some inconsistency with how everybody interacts, or the flexibility that the technology provides can make it really challenging in terms of consistency and complexity. And what that means is sometimes people don't know what to expect. And a big driver of satisfaction is meeting expectations. And so Impact has I think we have work that we are doing to take what's really great about the technology and then now figure out different ways to partner, whether it's with our customers, whether it's with agencies like yours, whether it's with the let's call it whatever they could be called, like, right, affiliate, media partner, publisher, influencer. Like, there's so many different names to companies that are essentially also brands, right? And how do we help them grow their business? So that's been my world during this, really leading up to and then into this pandemic. And so now, again, not only work differently in terms of the physical environment that you're in, but also, and the virtual part of our community, but also change the way that we are thinking about the relationships, right? And still applying the technology in a way that really takes advantage of some of the value proposition that Impact offers. So
that's awesome. One thing you touched on, can we dive into a little bit more? I know when Impact was being created and Todd pulled me aside and said, this is kind of what we're doing. Since then, anytime I referred to Impact as a network, I had my hand slapped. So I know what the difference is, but maybe our listeners don't. Talk to me. He never actually slapped me, but I think there were a few times he wanted to. But tell me the difference. And for our listeners who don't know, share the what's the difference between technology platform and your traditional network?
Yeah, I'd be happy to. So, you think back, if you go way, way back in time, for people, like, there were a couple of companies, I think, what was Rakuten was the company Linkshare, what was Conversant, which now owns, or, Epsilon, I think it would, no, not anymore. So yeah, Conversant owned both CJ and a company called Be Free. There was a company way back, it was called Dynamic Trade that became Performix, but Be Free was basically software. This goes so far back that it was, software that was loaded onto the desktop tower that was under people's desks, and you did installations and things along those lines. And then there was
I remember that.
Yep. And Linkshare was more of a network model at the time, but there was still, it was what I would refer to nowadays as an advertiser or a brand or a merchant sponsored ecosystem. So everything was built around the brands. And what was interesting was originally CJ, Lex's vision. Lex Cisney was the founder or the co-founder, along with Per Pedersen, who Per is, is now he was like 23 at the time, but he brought the technology to the equation. But it was Lex's vision, and one of the things was as an affiliate, it is really difficult to work with these companies because I have to go in and join each one individually, and they all have different terms and conditions and rules about how they're going to pay. And so he wanted to make it easier for the affiliate. So the actual network originally, CJ's network, was built around making it easier for an affiliate to do business. And it was reflected in things like the consistency where the network made decisions about when are you going to pay out, when, there was more of a payday type thing. And, making sure that all of the technology implementation was all the same, and that certain parts of the terms and conditions, like at that point, cookies are all working in the same way. And the network made a lot of the rules, and certainly thought about it from the affiliate point of view. And so you fast forward, and when there's 5 co-founders of Impact, but we all met and worked together at CJ. It was Per and Roger, and they were the tech piece, and then Todd Crawford, which a lot of people know, and then less people know me, and less people know Wade Crane, in terms of like the business side of it. And so, and Wade's very much like the operational piece and the data and the measurement system and how that all works. And I was more about the, client facing. And at that point, Todd was more the sales person. We thought about how do we build impact in a way that we improve upon, especially the technology and the workflow automation, that we really improve upon the tech in a way that any brand that wants to work or advertiser that wants to work on the platform, they have the ability to do so in a way that made sense for them. And I would argue, probably, in my opinion, this is my own opinion, is that we let that pendulum swing way too far, not only at Impact, but, the industry as a whole. And that we only often, well, not only, but very rarely do people view, especially the technology platforms or the technology solutions, the lens is still very much through the brand's point of view, as opposed to really the whatever publisher affiliate. Like I said, there's about 10 names that we could call it. And so really from the quote unquote partner's point of view. And so I just believe, and I really do, that we need to have a balanced ecosystem. So a platform really should be an ecosystem that allows for everybody who's working there to be able to partner with other companies and have that measurement system in place. Because if you really look at the philosophy of a partnership, if you really look at it, there's all these values that need to be present in order for that partnership to work. And so I think that the technology has all this functionality, but it's really just if you can think of it as it can be configured in a way that meets the needs of that customer and then facilitates a partnership. And it's all there, but it's just how you go about working together. And so my goal has been to pull that more to a more balanced ecosystem. So when you think about even affinity partnerships where 2 companies come together and they're both big brands and they're not traditionally what you would call an affiliate, how they might work together. Or we've seen quite a few companies that never participated in the performance space and being able to kind of come in and be an equal. So, you think about a CNN or you think about even a BuzzFeed, or you think about a PayPal. These guys are, brands in their own right. These companies are brands in their own right. They have, they should be viewed as equal. There should be some equitable approach that both companies have. And so I think a lot of times what you start to see is that most of the networks have still continued to gravitate. And maybe a lot of the agencies too, is like the paying customer is the demand side of in a partnership, right? And so I'm just hoping to like bring that balance back and have the technology applied to everybody, whatever their need may be. And you can do that with a platform, because it's just the customer can configure things the way they need to. And they can set up the relationship and the terms and the conditions and the way the data goes back and forth between the 2 companies working together in the partnership. It shouldn't be the network that makes that decision. And then the advisors of the company, which could be the agencies, it could be a consultant that can come in and say, okay, what are you trying to accomplish from a strategy perspective? And they can provide that advice, and then you apply the technology to it. And I think in a network environment, a lot of the time that they combine the service and the technology, and they start to say, we know best, and we're going to tell you what to do, and we're going to provide all those services directly. And it may or may not be in the best interest of the two companies and how they're working together. It may not be. I often talk about, like, look, the networks they make money every time that the publisher makes money, right? They don't make money if the publisher's not making money. But what are they really contributing from the publisher's point of view? And so, really in that value proposition, they're taking a pretty healthy part of the margin, even when they're dropping their price. And it's like, are their interests really are they really aligned? The service provider portion of the network, or the network itself, is it really aligned with the customer and the company and what they're trying to accomplish? So, it's been interesting, because I've had to, sort of sell against models that we've created over the years, and then come back in and say, okay, how do we change these or evolve these so that we can still serve and provide great value, and not just from the point of view of, we're going to help you, like for brands, we're going to help you spend less money and not pay your partners, and, cut everybody out of the equation, so that only your interests are being met when you're talking about growth through partnerships, right? So we want you to think about who are the other companies that are involved in this ecosystem, and make sure that we're providing value for everybody.
That is a really clear explanation of the difference. And what I liked most of all there, and what I heard, was everyone on an equal footing. And definitely back in the day, and it was the advertiser and the network drove the terms and how this relationship was going, and everyone on an equal footing. I really like to hear that. And it also kind of jives with, I think, what I've seen recently and what my staff has seen. It's almost like the rise of the affiliates know their power now.
Right.
You said earlier, like, they're brands too.
Yeah.
And, some of them have been around for as long as you and I have, and
That's right.
They've created a brand, and now they want to be able to, and are flexing their muscle. One thing we've seen is a tremendous rise in inclusion and setup fees to work with partners. And as my staff is trying to navigate that with clients, it's really about, the audience. They've built an audience.
That's right.
And you need to pay to access that.
That's right. You got it exactly right. That's exactly right. And if we think about, especially performance marketing, and you take it off, whether it's off platform or off network, it's like, how does that relationship really work? When I talk to the partner side, which is a big part of what I do now, certainly is what do you do, like, in a strategic relationship? What do you do? They go negotiate all of that before they actually come together with the technology, right? They don't even find each other a lot of that time, but the sponsoring partner is just as often the publisher, or, the content site, or the influencer. They're sponsoring the partnership just as often. And people go, what do you mean by that? And I'm like, well, who's really drafting the terms and conditions and inviting the other one into a relationship? And, sometimes it might be that they're selling a package, but really, if they're going to take the idea of, we're going to collaborate together and work together for a shared outcome, what happens is that generally occurs offline, and there is that equitable kind of, or just balance of power. And so when the publishers are forced to work in sometimes a network environment, the balance of power has definitely shifted in a way that is not favorable for them. And so I'm like, hey guys, like, you don't have to measure the value or contribution that you're making in real time just because that's the way the tracking used to work 20 years ago. That's not necessarily the overall value of the relationship. You might look at it over a broader period of time. And just because we could split commissions and, knock people out of the equation or what, like, let's stop doing it that way. And how about we just look at all the data, and then over a period of time say, hey, you know what, we'll right price how much we pay based on the value of the contribution that's being made. Or on the other side of it is what are the KPI that really matter to both parties and make sure that both parties' expectations are being met. And so I think a lot of it has to do with what happens before the connection is actually made. And I think organic connections are awesome, but I also think sometimes the guided connections, and that's really where the agency, if I'm a brand, why do I want to work with an agency? It's that expertise, but also that ability to bridge and broker those conversations so that the publisher interests are being met and so that they're actually working together. It's not transactional. And I think so often when you look back over how affiliate marketing has, come to be, it's a lot of times it's very transactional in the viewpoint, at least from, many times the brand. And people will have been saying for years, oh, it's all about the relationships. That is true, but it's also about the economics. It's also about, the data itself and measuring how things are working and being able to come at it with all of those things in mind to say, hey, you know what, this is really what makes sense. And it's transparency in the, I know that word gets thrown around a lot, but transparency in the communication, transparency in the data itself. It's like, here's the metrics I'm really measuring, and you're not making it, you're not hitting those metrics in this partnership, and then allowing time to see whether or not you can respond to that information and make the adjustments so that both parties are getting out of it what they need. So, it's been really fun. I have had to look at the business from a lot of different angles, and also have to take a lot of constructive feedback, might be the way to put it, but, really letting people know, letting them vent about, hey, this is not, impact maybe. They love certain aspects of the technology and maybe the reporting, but they're like, hey, in this other area, maybe you're kind of falling short of my expectation. And some people say that more diplomatically than others. When you've had a relationship with people for a really long time, then they know you. They're like, hey, I'm going to let you really have it. And it's been good, because it's like, okay, we're here to listen and we're trying to put the right people and invest in the right way. And not lose sight of all of the enthusiasm that people have had about why they came to either buy Impact or are working with a company that happens to have their tracking on Impact. So yeah, it's been really great. And it's been fun. It's been fun to reconnect with a lot of different people or companies that I'd worked with way back in the day. And to your point, some of them have been around longer. And seeing that transition where it's like, you and I and others, people on your team, I know, certainly competitors of yours, like some of us probably have more knowledge of the history of some of these companies than the people that work there. I forget when it was, but, just talking about Pepper Jam, right? And you were like, they were a search. They were affiliate, but also like, well, really they were a jam, they were a Pepper Jam, but
Yeah.
they were they were a search company, and then they were affiliate. And then all of a sudden it's like, they kept transitioning where they were kind of like a service provider in the mix. And then the next thing, they pop up and they have a technology and a network, which is now, got bought by another, by a platform. Right. And so, but because of the services component that they have, within that group, and there was agencies that got bought along the way that provide that, and so you laugh because you're like, I could weave that whole thing back if I really took the time to plot it back out. And but why that's helpful is to understand where the different value proposition, what was missing, what did they do to grow their business to the point where they looked attractive to another company.
It's been quite a trip, right? Yeah. One of my podcast guests recommended and said, look, we need to get some of the people who've been in this industry for 20 years on a roundtable podcast and just share stories of the last 20 years and document some of the crazy stuff that happened back then. Right. Now, my last question, we're way over time.
Yeah.
Where do you think the channel is going now? We've had, kind of a migration in ways we haven't seen before, where e-commerce has really taken off. We have the pandemic going on. There's so much things changing. Where do you see the channel in the next year, 10 years? Where's it going?
Yeah. Well, I think you've heard me say that this concept of balancing the power, if you will, within the partnership, that what that requires, I think, is having an understanding and a value of understanding of where, I think I've talked about this already, but the value where you overlap, right? And so here's the theme I'm hearing and seeing. It's one I'm personally really passionate about, so it might be a little bit of confirmational bias, but the consumer, when I say the customer right now, I'm talking about the consumer. It's the consumer experience is really where I think everyone has to head in terms of how you market, in terms of how the touch points, and really putting the consumer or the customer first. So I think customer experience, it's been there for a while. You think about things like the buyer journey or the customer journey, and you think about all those different touch points where customer gets engaged as they're trying to make a decision about whether or not they want to buy something or whether or not they want to participate in something. And I think where, we talked a little bit about the audience the overlap, right? And so there has to be a good brand fit. There has to be that. What's that common thing? It's the consumer. It's the customer. So the customer experience is where this is headed now. Are you adding value directly to the customer as they're engaged with your company or website? And then as you transition or help transition that consumer to the next point in their journey, is there enough consistency, and do you share enough of the same values of where they're going or where they're headed so that you could potentially build that partnership? And I think that, like, for example, when people think about the content sites and they say, hey, I really want to, I don't want to work with loyalty or coupon. I only want to work with, this is the brand, right? I only want to work with the content sites. It's like, well, what do you do with that, right? And I just try to get to the point of like, I think the reason that I try to ask questions to learn, but it's like, you want to make sure that the consumer, when they get to you, that they've demonstrated an intent to buy, or that they've demonstrated an engagement that makes sense for them to now be with you. And the idea that you think about an emailer and you're like, yeah, I don't want anything to do with spam. Well, yeah, because it's a terrible customer experience or consumer experience. But in fact, an email is absolutely an amazing place to be able to put a lot of great content as long as it makes sense for the consumer. And so I see this whole industry moving in the direction of, as you continue to partner together and you collaborate about that, the common ground is the consumer's experience. And I truly believe that if you put the consumer, the customer first, as always your reason for engaging them, then the concept of the partnership is you can have a shared outcome that makes sense and clearly your values are aligned. And will technology facilitate that? Absolutely. But it's a great example of, people talk a lot about predictive, like using AI and machine learning and, trying to predict what the consumer wants. Well, how about let's just ask them what their preference is? How about we just make sure that we're helping them get the information they need if they want to buy something, right? Don't just try to push it in front of them. Now, if I'm a brand or a merchant that's trying to sell something and the person comes to my site from a company that I partnered with in terms of the referral, did I help them? Was the touch point where they were engaged, is it adding value to the journey in such a way that we can now fulfill? And also post-transaction, you should be partnering with companies to make sure that post-conversion, if you want to call it that, or post-action that's been taken, are you taking additional steps in that journey to make sure that the consumer's experience is really top-notch? And you might partner with other companies along the way that help you do that. So, like, I like to talk a lot about in socially responsible, shopping. There are sites, examples of like the charity sites, where they're enhancing the conversion because the presence of, I can now make as a consumer, I can now make a donation to a site, to the charity of my choice. Wow, that's like a very powerful thing. And so in a way, they may not be the the site might be technology and not even the source of the traffic, but you could partner with them to make sure that the consumer converts. And do you want to compensate them for being part of that journey and engaging and partnering with them? So I think as you look at all the technology that's popping up and solving for problems, you could really think about, is this some way, in some way, shape, or form, enhancing how our shared customer really can go through their journey? So that's my prediction. We shall see.
Well, we shall. And thank you for sharing that. It jives with so much that we do here. But Lisa, we are so over time. I want to thank you for joining us. If someone wanted to reach out to you and get more of this wisdom or be mentored and mentor, where do they find you?
Definitely Lisa at impact.com. I still was fortunate enough, they saved that email for me. And I think that's one way, and I'll definitely share some additional ways that you can put in the show notes.
Awesome. Thank you. Well, Lisa, this has been, as all our conversations, entertaining, engaging, enlightening. I learned a whole lot and really enjoyable. So thank you for joining us. And I have just a list of other questions that I want to talk to you. So I may reach out in the months to come to see if we could do a round two.
Yeah.
But thank you again.
Yeah, absolutely. Totally game for it.
Well, thank you, Lisa, for an entertaining, engaging, and enlightening conversation today. Like all our conversations, thank you so much. For our audience, a couple things I want to pull out that are good to note here is a big difference between a technology platform and a network. And what Impact is trying to do is to bring more equality to the relationship. And that really is in line with what's going on in the industry right now. Many of you, if on the advertiser side, you may be seeing affiliates kind of flex their muscle a little more. Inclusion fees, higher rates to get involved. Affiliates are becoming brands themselves. And that's one thing Lisa pointed out. They are their own brands. So that's one of the things that's changing right now in our industry. And we're going to talk more about that with future guests, also a video series, but affiliates are becoming brands, and the technology platform can provide a way to have more equality and a firmer footing where everyone's on the same ground in this relationship. And when we talk about partnerships, and that's one thing Lisa really drove home, is that ability to have equal footing and win-win situations, transparency in the data going back and forth. So we definitely appreciate Impact for doing that. And then that element at the end, where the industry is going, a laser focus on the consumer, their path to purchase, their buyer journey, and then how the affiliates fit in with that. It's a huge thing to remember right now, as we talk about where the space is going, how to take advantage of it. And Lisa touched on it too, of which affiliate do you need to be working with? A lot of advertisers just want content. They see no value in coupon affiliates and affinity, loyalty. But if you look at the audience, who is the audience? What's their behavior? How do they view those websites? And you look at that data and you determine who you want to work with based on that data. A lot of times we make emotional decisions based on the type of affiliate before we look and see, are they driving consumers that we need? And are we using those affiliates in that consumer journey effectively? So many great things here in this conversation. Lisa, I so appreciate you. I appreciate your input into my career and what you're doing now. And like she said, if you guys will include ways to get a hold of Lisa in the show notes. And yeah, so again, if you need help with your affiliate program, you can go to jebcommerce.com. If you don't know exactly what to do next, well, don't sit there by yourself fretting about it. I'm here to help. You can get a hold of me at gethelp@jebcommerce.com, or you can go to calendly.com/Jamie Birch and set up 15 minutes, half hour with me, and I will spend some time with you going over what your main problem is. You can also find our strategy roadmap service at jebcommerce.com/strategy. And hey, if you want to be a guest, just reach out. You can also reach out at gethelp@jebcommerce.com. jebcommerce.com. I want to thank all our listeners. I've seen some really great comments. Mary Ellen, thank you for showing me the Avengers tie-in to the Get Help. I love that meme. Thank you for doing that. Thank you for sharing our podcast. And hey, if you're out there, you found value in today's podcast, can you go please leave us a review in iTunes or the podcast player of your choice, and share this with a friend that you think would find this information valuable, and in your socials. I want to thank you for listening. If you have a show idea, let me know. Again, gethelp@jebcommerce.com. Thanks.